Hi. So this page is called Transcendental Truth. I think at the uh, beyond life coaching, underlying all human activity, there are really amazing and interesting things to be found. And I think that we're all looking in some ways for that truth of existence. And great many traditions have tried to do this. Myself, I'm a Buddhist practitioner, and it's really Buddhism that changed my life. Um, and I think we can sometimes feel let down by what is the knowledge that we kind of find available when we grow up with. But that's kind of part of life's search, isn't it, really? And life's journey is to find those truths. And so it's this point of this is not to sort of say, oh, this is definitely true, this is definitely true. But it, you know, to find those key points of existence which really are universally valid is massively important. So, um, in a way, we could call this page Beyond Life Coaching. It's more in tune in a way with the mindfulness meditation, um, and more in tune with holistic work in a sense. Um, and philosophy as well is really what we're talking about. We're kind of talking about a living philosophy. If you look at people like Kant or Hegel or Plato. But beyond that, I think if we start really looking at Buddhist understanding and the understandings of the knowledge, which mostly seems to come out of northern India, Kashmir, and Tibet, and spread really from India around the world, firstly to China and into Cambodia, Vietnam, down then into Japan, and now seems to be spreading westwards. I think that really this is where we can get a huge amount of life changing, life enriching knowledge, a living philosophy that which really works. And I really found personally that from Buddhism, and continue to find that from Buddhism, because when we're talking about transcendental, transcending, we're talking about the things that go beyond the machinations of our small self, really. And this is key to well-being. I believe it's the underpinnings of this site, and I think life really, is the nature of being. We can call this ontology or epistemology in grand and amazing words, but really it's just what are we, as beings. And I think we all need to have an understanding of that. So I think that one amazing way of looking at that is to look, for example, at the Buddhist tradition, which states that there's an unconditioned element of being, and then this existence, this self, ultimately, and this is expressed through Vedanta and other open spiritualities. And I think that's what's amazing and where the world is going now, is to really know ourselves through open spiritualities, of which Buddhism and Vedanta surely strongly suggest themselves as that. Because what it does is it really enables you to know yourself, what actually a human is. And so, yeah, in Buddhism, for example, it's very often framed as the unconditioned is that which is beyond all the eternal flux and change of daily life. The experience of that change is often linked to senses and sense perceptions. If we kind of look what we are as humans, one way we could look at that is to say that there's the transcendental or the unconditioned, the divine, Ein Sof, Brahma, Nibbana, Nirvana, and then the key elements which create an experience within that, we could say are the senses. So the senses are, of course, we're taking in information all day long, and largely we do this through the five senses. And in Buddhist tradition, the mind is seen as a sense at its lower cognitive level. It's seen as a sense because it does imprint information, it imprints on it, and this results in conditioning. So the senses are very much linked to conditioning, and this conditioning is certainly linked to our experience of life in terms of well-being. If we get to a stage where we feel on the inside there's chaos, if you like, turbulence and such, oscillation, bit conflict, well, there really are wonderful ways of understanding this, and in that knowing ourselves. This is, if you like, a metaphysical approach to well-being, which I think really is the only way. In that knowing ourselves, just peace comes, an active, alive peace. And that's what we want as humans. That's why I do this work, and that's why I encourage anybody to get involved in that. So if we look at a model of self based on, let's say when we think of ourselves, we often maybe think in terms of images, don't we? We kind of associate with the idea that we're a body, let's say. And many people are asked to define themselves, probably a definition somewhere involving the body would come first. But is that really true? Because really mind is more powerful than the physical matter. There's a lot pointing to that, isn't it? And I think some people might shrink back from that because the mind seems such a huge thing to learn about and understand. It's certainly very powerful. But again, the Buddhist teachings and Vedanta, certainly two that I've found that really enable you to do that. So if we look, for example, at what we actually are, and this is in terms of how we can experience life joyfully, because if we start to see what we are and how we process information, we start to understand ourselves, and any areas where we've really got strong feeling of dislocation, of oscillation, of difficulty, in that understanding, it becomes understood. So part of this is this, what this video is about really is indeed knowing yourself. And if we look at what the human is, as we say, we've got these senses, 6 if we include the mind at a lower cognitive level, and that's adding in information all the time. Okay, now the way, according to the Buddhist model, which is very powerful to say the least, on all levels of our information taken throughout the day, we are basically, mostly subconsciously, forming a like, a dislike, or a neutral to pretty much everything we come into contact with, unless we're in a transcendental mode, we could say. Now that can cause a lot of conflict with them. So to, again, knowing ourselves, being able to mindfully watch that, using mindfulness to watch those reactions, if you like, going on, is life-changing because we can detach from it. We can experience the being rather than the engagement with the sense modes, modalities, sense bases, and sense objects. So on this level, we can start to know ourselves to some extent. We can start to see how we function as humans and know ourselves through that. In many ways, as I say, we often conceive ourselves as the body, but we're not really, are we? If we, for example, engage in meditation, There are meditations where we can just get a sense of our being, and really what we have is being, and in that being, which is called Atma in the Vedic Vedanta tradition, we could say non-self, we could say the unconditioned, perhaps in the Buddhist tradition. In that being lie intellect, senses, so the mental body, the feelings body. And what very often happens to us is that we are caught in the feelings body. So we're over identifying. And identification is linked to perception. So this area of identification is a really amazing vehicle and module for healing and for experiencing life joyfully as well-being, because it happens on very subtle levels, but we are identifying all the time, and often in like, dislike, or neutral, with all these events going on around us. So some ways of getting around this are transcending. So what are ways of transcending? What is transcendent reality? Well, what it is experiencing yourself as being, experiencing yourself as are. You is, ultimately. So isness of reality, this pure isness, and this is called Sat Chit Ananda in the tradition of Vedanta, beautiful tradition of Vedanta, and again, we could humbly call that the unconditioned, perhaps, in the tradition of Buddhism. And as we say, all the machinations and mechanisms of yourself lie within that being, essentially. So with mindfulness, for example, we're able to start to experience just that being. And that being is timeless. And that being is eternal. And that being is consciousness. And that being is the real being, the real you. Not the things you identify with, and certainly not the things that may have caused any trauma through over-identification. So trauma can often occur when there's habitual over-identification with certain aspects. It can mean that it's a prompt to change certain areas of your life, but at least we have certain ways of really definitely and concretely working and knowing that we can achieve improvement. So one way of working, of transcending, is through kindness. And I don't necessarily mean a kindness that you just kind of have a concept of, oh, I'll be kind. Because that concept of kindness involves a concept of you as a fixed being. And we're not fixed beings. Again, that's related to body identity generally. We are interlinking, interconnected aspects of reality, of the one, ever changing, in flux, in interrelationship. We move with in relationship to things very often. There's not a discrete individual I identity. We are that one. So yeah, we want to, if we practice this kind of kindness that we're talking about, it's a kindness that leads to a non-duality. It's a kindness that leads to a transcending of this limited I identity. And one amazing way to do it is the holy practice of metta bhavana of the Buddhist tradition, which is an ancient practice, but in it, all you do in essence is sit and you send kindness, firstly, to an image of yourself. Visualize yourself and you send kindness to yourself. And that may or may not sound powerful, but it is life-changing because it is consciousness changing. So whatever you've got stored in your subconscious, if you do this practice once a day, you will love your life. There's a wonderful Buddhist story of a young man in Japan who would possibly be called a wasteling, And this is the great Sangharakshita who tells this story. And he lacks any direction, all these kind of things. It seems like he's wasted, just drinking all the time and that kind of thing. But he finally decides to try and do something. He goes to a Buddhist monastery, which is quite close by, and an old monk agrees to speak with him. And he says, okay, these, you know, what is it that you want to do? And he says he's thinking about becoming a monk. And the monk says, okay, well, possibly, but we need to look at your skills and any suitability that you might have. And what we'll do is we'll arrange a game of chess with one of our elderly monks, and we'll see how we go through that. And they start playing the game, and the monk turns very serious and says that the loser of this game will face a very, very severe penalty, I'm afraid. And so the young man starts playing, starts trying to do really well, and he starts to see, oh, I really could get the monk in that. I could beat him, and that will be check. But he stops and he looks at the monk and he empathizes and sees that this monk has spent his life trying to live a holy life, trying to really bring some change and help people. And he says, well, who am I? What have I done? Nothing. I'm not as worthy as this monk. I don't care what the penalty is. I'm going to let this monk win. And so he throws the game, as we maybe say today. And the old monk who's organised this is very clever. The whole thing was set up as a test. The whole thing was set up to test the young man and see what he would do. And at the end of it, he says, well, you've learned two things today. Concentration, being in that mode of being, and compassion, because you have given to this elderly monk. And he says, that's very good. That's really, he thinks to himself, that's the makings of a bodhisattva. Yeah. And that's really, really special, because ultimately Buddhist tradition does come down in many senses to two aspects: wisdom and samadhi, being, one-pointedness, that transcendent being, and kindness, compassion. So this practice that we're talking about is very much about that compassion, on that kindness and compassion level. And the story begins, the exercise begins, as I say, with visualizing yourself, and you start sending kindness. And you might say, what does that mean, sending kindness? But it means opening your heart to kindness to yourself. And in that, you truly, if you gently persist with this for maybe 20 minutes, same time, ideally each day for a couple of weeks, you'll experience a profound change in your life. And you will know that all things are interconnected. The next stage of the meditation is you visualize a good friend, and then an acquaintance, and then somebody you're not getting on very well with. And then the fifth stage is you equalize this feeling of loving kindness to all of these beings, and then you add in all beings, as many as possibly can be added. And you don't necessarily have to think of them one by one, but you get a sense of completion. You get a sense of adding in all beings from the town you're in, the area of the country, that particular landmass that you're on, the continent, the oceans, all of the continents, the whole planet, other planets, the cosmos, the space between, the energy, the kindness that ultimately exists in all of nature, because kindness is very closely related to the transcendentality, to quality of divine creative love. And that's what we are. And with an exercise like this, we're getting in touch with that. So these are some ways that we really can change our lives. And it's on this holistic level, more than life coaching, more than any other thing that we really experience it, because we experience the love that we are as beings. And meditation practice is all it takes, really, to do that. You realize how conditioned you have become. Meditation shows you that everything is changeable, everything is impermanent. So we contact with the layer that's beyond that impermanence. And meditation allows us to do that. So transcendence is any number of amazing methods. I heartily recommend you look at Vedanta, the Brahma Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, and certainly the Buddhist practice of metta bhavana, of kindness meditation, of mindfulness of breathing, and practices beyond that, should you get into it, because it's really life-changing. Like Tai Chi, we start talking about elements, mechanics of being, such as prana and the pranic body. The pranic body is your energy body. Yes, and what we're very often locked in is the feelings body. I'd rather say feelings than emotional body, because emotions are conglomerations of thought and feeling, really. But feelings body is really defines more, I think, accurately that area, and that's what we are: thought, feeling, and emotion. They're key fields of human experience. So when we work with them, we can see a great number of exercises to enable growth, and that growth really is defined as an understanding of self as non-individual, as non-local, self as interconnected, self as part of a one. And that is the highest goal, so many would say, and the experience is of pure joy, and knowing your being is bliss, joy, priti, ananda, as these things will be described in the Sanskrit, which so much of this comes from. So yeah, this is a brief insight or talk on Transcendental. If any of this resonates with you, please get in touch. We can look at a number of ways to improve health and well-being based on these practices. And that's the whole thing, isn't it? To love life. Life is joy. That's what we have to know. So thank you ever so much for listening, and please get in touch if you feel inclined to do so. And take care.